Welcome to Turning Point. I'm Becky Alfrey.
And I'm Jessica Alfrey. It's important to be passionate about life and always see the good in every situation.
Guests in today's show listened to the still small voice inside them and allowed themselves to be guided and directed, which in turn led them to their purpose.
Children are so good at having open minds and hearts. Our next guest, Leesann Shefa, shares turning points of how having open heart surgery as a young girl didn't stop her from following her dreams.
When I was a child, a baby, they discovered that I had a congenital heart defect. I had 3 holes in my heart. It was in 1955, and things were pretty primitive at that point in terms of heart surgery. And the doctors at the time counseled my parents to wait until I was 10 to do the open heart surgery. How they found out was that mainly I just turned blue, my fingers, my lips. So as a child growing up, I wasn't allowed to run, to dance, to play. I had to be very quiet. As an infant, I was carried around because they were afraid that crying would exacerbate some of the other medical conditions that I was that I was born with at the time. So at the age of 10, I went to White Memorial Hospital and had open heart surgery. There was a team of 12 people, and the surgery was successful, and then my lungs collapsed and they had to do the surgery all over again. I caught pneumonia, and so then they had to do a tracheotomy because basically
Oh my gosh.
there was so much fluid in my lungs.
Oh, and 10 years old, you're going through this.
And so at one point in my life, I used to really identify with this story, and it was really formed who I was. I saw myself as being very weak and as a victim and very afraid of life.
Well, I'm sure your mother had fear and was very protective of you because of this.
My mother was very protective, and it really formed who I was as a child.
Of course, it would.
I think that there's a couple of things that are very significant for me right now at this time in my life as I reflect back to that time. The first is the importance of the relationships that I had with my family. My aunt and my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother and father were so important to me that because they kept my life going, they kept me connected, especially the maternal line in my family, my mother, my grandmother, my great aunts. When I was in the surgery, and it was in between the 2 surgeries, I was packed in ice. And it was like time warp, because I actually had no idea what was going on. But I remember there was a clock that always said the same thing. And my aunt was pregnant with my one of my cousins at that point, and they weren't going to allow her to see me. And I remember that afterwards, she told me she insisted on seeing me. And
was this when you had pneumonia?
It was probably, yeah. It was
okay,
in
because why would they not want her to see you? I don't understand that.
Right. So what I remember is I remember seeing her at the very end of this long, it seemed like a long room. Obviously, I was out of it.
Right.
But I remember seeing her and feeling that connection. And that's what's really important to me as I reflect back, is that connection that we have between people that we love. Because their love actually got me through and helps me as I am now. I mean, I'm so grateful.
Huge.
The other thing that was significant regarding the surgery was that there was 2 girls, myself and another girl, that went through the surgery at the time. She went the day before, and then I was the next day in the schedule.
Was she about 10 as well? Okay.
And maybe a month later, after my strength came back, maybe not that long, I don't really know, it was a long time ago.
Right. In the 60s. It was in the 60s.
It was 65 when the surgery was,
right.
1965, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. I found out that she died. And the significance for me now about that is that I remember when I realized that I felt deeply committed and moved to make my life count.
Now, how old were you when you knew she died?
10.
You were 10, so she didn't make it through the surgery, basically.
Right.
The surgery didn't take.
No.
Did she die during the surgery? Did you know?
I
Okay,
don't-
it doesn't matter. She didn't make it.
No.
She had the surgery, and you were told.
Later on, because she and I were friends. We had
Okay.
become friends. We'd
All
gone
right.
through.
So that's what I was trying to find
Yeah.
out. At what point were you told that she died? So it was like months later?
Weeks,
Weeks?
maybe.
Okay.
And once the doctors knew that
You were okay.
I was okay.
You were in stable.
Yeah, that I was stable. Then,
Then-
because I started asking for her,
Okay.
because we were friends.
Right.
So the significance now, as I reflect back about that, is that I've had this sense of determination and
Gratefulness?
definitely
Yeah.
gratefulness, but it's
Yeah.
more than that. Like this, like calling, but like
Yeah.
really, like I really need to make sure that I make my life count. And so that's driven me my entire life.
Turning points happen at all ages and stages of life. Sometimes, when we burn a bridge, we think the opportunities are gone forever. But sometimes we can rebuild and make it even stronger. Eddie Foulger shares a turning point and events in his life that made him start looking at life completely differently.
First dramatic turning point when I was young. That's interesting. You know, I guess I'm gonna have to say that a big turning point for me was actually a health problem that I had when I was about 19, 20 years old. I remember that I was working at a restaurant at the time because I had just gotten fired from World Gym because I didn't open the gym up. Okay, so when I was young, I was very much into bodybuilding. 18, 19, I always idolized the bodybuilders and I wanted to be like them. And then I competed at 19 years old and I competed again at 20. About 20 years old, after my show, I sort of, like a lot of young people do, I felt like I had accomplished so much. So I was, partying on the weekends and so on and so forth. Until one day I was supposed to open the gym on Saturday and I came in and I just didn't open the gym. Sorry, Wanda and Anthony. And so then they asked me if I could come in and just open the gym the next day. They said, we can't promise you anything with your job, but can you at least come in tomorrow and open the gym? I said, yes. What did I do? I did the same thing the next day, so just bad decision making,
There was something in your life at that time that you were doing that wasn't working.
Correct, yeah.
And what would that be?
It would definitely have to be a combination of young youth, bad choices, lack of responsibility, on top of abusing alcohol and drugs.
Something
so,
that lots of people in their 20s do, and teenagers.
Yeah, and I was definitely doing that pretty well at the time. And so when I lost that job, I remember I got a job at Fridays, which was like right up the street from the old World Gym, and I kind of liked that job too because it was like a party atmosphere and everybody was having fun. But I ended up getting a health problem. I got gallstones, so my stomach inflamed, and I ended up in the hospital, and I couldn't work, and so they had scheduled this surgery for me.
So gallstones, I always thought of that as something older people got gallstones.
No, you could
But
get
you
them
were
at
young.
any age. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And so I was scheduled to get my gallstones taken out. Okay. I remember an acquaintance of mine had called me and asked me what I was up to, and I, explained to him how I didn't have any money and I wasn't doing anything, I couldn't work, and he had this bright idea. He was coming through town and he was gonna, show me how to sell drugs, And that right there, if I was to look at, a point in time in my life where I seriously made, the big decision to go off the other end, that would have to be it, He came by. Long story short, I started selling narcotics, and I think it was 6 months later I got raided and I started my 20s as a 20-year-old / in and out kind of convict kind of a guy.
Mm-hmm. But because of drugs.
Absolutely.
So it was using them, but selling them is what put you in jail.
Correct.
Basically,
Yeah.
okay. And so the turning point then, there had to be something changed because you're squeaky clean now, and you're the epitome of health. So that's a lot of things can happen in all of the years through that. But fast forward, something happened then that made it that it wasn't worth it anymore. How old were you when that turning point, and you've told it to me before, and that's why I'm remembering it, but it was quite dramatic. And instead of being a fighter, fighting back, this time you actually handled it differently.
Well, yeah, let me see, I guess so that all started when I was probably about 20, 21 years old, and I think I hung up my gloves at about 32.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't. After about 11 years of, life just becomes a blur. When you're in and out of prison, and when you're out, you're always on drugs, and your mind is never clear. And it started getting to the point where I couldn't even differentiate differences in time frames of my life. I would think back at, when was this that occurred? Was this 2 years ago, 5 years ago? I mean, I just couldn't figure it out for the life of me. Watching my parents get older through photographs and watching our address change as I'm away. This is a common thing for a lot of guys,
Okay.
Especially guys with drug problems and alcohol problems like I have, and so...
Life kind of stays at one place, but the world keeps changing.
Absolutely, yeah. You isolate yourself and take yourself away while the world keeps going on,
Right.
And that's just how it goes. Eventually, I guess I just decided that I needed to make, a real strong, hard left somewhere, or I was going to be right there for the rest of my life, and I knew that.
So early 30s, you started feeling you'd had enough.
Yeah, my early 30s, I started feeling that. Finally decided that I would do whatever it took to change my life. I sort of lost confidence in myself, in my own decision making to even save my own life or to make a positive decision. Every time you get those handcuffs slapped back on you, you lose that much more of yourself, and you give everything up again, and you go away again, and it's just really no way to live.
Sometimes our passion in life can set us on fire with motivation. Luckily for our next guest, the fires weren't in the kitchen. Chef Woody shares turning points of how he made it to the desert and is adding flavor to his life through his profession.
I was offered an opportunity for a class that I was taking in my last year of high school called OWE, Occupational Work Experience. The gist of taking a class was that the school would help me find a job. If I found the job and I went out and I worked that job, I would only have to go to school for 2 hours a day. I would much rather be out in the real working world than to go to school for 6 or 7 hours a day, which I didn't like as a young boy, so any opportunity to get out of school I took advantage of. Having found a job as a dishwasher at a country club, I held that job for 1 year. There was one instance where a pantry chef was a no-call, no-show for 3 days. And on the third day of this pantry chef's absence, the chef knew that he needed to find somebody else to fill that position more permanently. That's when I heard my name beckon through the hallways and in through the dish room and the kitchen that I needed to get myself out of the dish room and up into the kitchen, that I was going to be learning the pantry on that day. That was not the reason that I took the job. I wanted to be just out of school. I didn't want to be a cook. The day that I stepped into the role as a pantry cook, I got my butt handed to me. I had so many people degrade me, demean me, put me down, yell at me, tell me to hurry up for dishes and getting out their orders and stuff. And none of them didn't care that it was my first day in the position, not knowing what I was doing.
Wow.
So during the day,
You're like 17?
17 going on 18.
Okay, all right.
During the day, I just couldn't think more to myself, but just to get me through the day, and I'm not coming back tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. That much fun. Yeah.
Well, I
No, it
wanted just
sounds-
to be a dishwasher.
Exactly. Okay. So what happened?
That evening, I got many kudos and congratulations, if that's the right word to use, from the chef and other cooks around me, that they thought I did a great job doing what I did and trying to do it as best as I could. And I thought it was just all of them trying to blow hot air up my back and trying to get me to come back tomorrow. And I really felt to myself that this is not what I want to do, so I was not going to be returning tomorrow. Well, I got a ride home from a friend that I was working with who was a chef there. And I lived maybe 45 minutes away from the country club. So as I'm driving home, talking with this man, who is also a chef at this country club, I don't know what happened in that 45-minute to an hour drive home, but by the time that this guy was taking me to my house and we're pulling in the driveway, I'm asking him questions on what I need to bring with me tomorrow. What do I need to do to make myself better? What tools do I need to step into this position to start learning? I don't know what happened. I've had that question asked me many times.
He sparked your interest, obviously.
Something sparked my interest.
Yeah.
Whether it was my friend Paul who was driving me home, or maybe people thinking that I wasn't cut out to do what they tried to put me in a position to do. Maybe it was just not wanting to be a failure at something. I don't know what. I can draw some conclusions into possibly what led me into being more excited about getting into this cooking industry. And that is, Mom and Dad were great cooks. I loved everything they used to cook.
Okay.
But I would never get in the kitchen and cook with Mom and Dad.
They didn't invite you to, they just did it themselves.
They would invite us in to do the hard work.
Okay.
My mom would make pierogies, or what we would call pita head nowadays. Pierogies would be what we would refer to as, the little dumplings that are stuffed with potatoes and onions. Well, my mom worked for the church commissary, so I had to do a 50-pound bag of onions once a week as far as cleaning them, dicing them, packaging them up when I would come home from school, so then she could take them to the church and make all the pierogies.
That would be the hard part.
Yeah, but there was something about that
Yeah.
that I think I was able to subconsciously draw on, as well as the love and the experiences that I remember Mom and Dad, for all the times they were cooking and would cook for me, that ultimately helped me decide that on that way home that one night, that this could be a rewarding line of work for me to get into and be involved with.
It's easy to take things for granted. Our next guest, Hilda Zamora, never took her life for granted. The first of her family to learn English and get an education, she believes in justice for all and is dedicated to making the world a more beautiful and honorable place.
Hilda, tell us a heartwarming story of the home that you bought.
After being second year as a bail agent, I was doing very good financially, and I was very blessed, and I was doing great, phenomenal, more than what I ever expected. At the time, we were living in a mobile home, so I wanted to make sure that I surprised my mom and I gave her the house that I once promised her I was going to get her.
Oh. You said that to her when you were younger?
I did. I was 6 years old, then we got evicted, and we were homeless. And I remember telling her, "Don't worry, Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a house." And we left it at that. I was 6, 7 years old because she was still carrying me. Fast forward 2 years into the bail bonds, I'm probably 23 years old. And I get her a house, but I don't get her any house. I get her a house that I felt that it was worthy of her value. We went from living in cabins, people's garages, mobile homes, to the house that I have now. And it's the best thing we've ever had. So when I got the keys, it was for Mother's Day. Wow. In Mexico, we celebrated the 10th, May 10th. And I remember we organized everything to surprise her. My brothers flew from Sacramento, went inside the house. I told her I was busy, I needed to do a notary public, and I needed her to run some errands with me to go see a client. She was always willing to do that, so I knew it wouldn't be any problem. So we did. We drove, and I pulled to the driveway of the house. She looks at the right side where the house was, and she looks at the house and she says, "Wow, I'm so proud of you. Your clients must have a lot of money. This is a very nice house." And I said, "Well, I don't know if the owners have any money, but they sure have a big mortgage, right?" Because I was the owner of the house. And I'm persuading her to come in so she can knock on the door, and she wouldn't do it. She was too humble. She was embarrassed. What will my clients think, So then she tells me right before she gets out of the car, she says, "You know what, I am interested though. If you can convince your clients so I can clean this house for them. It's a huge house. They might need help to clean the house." My heart shattered, but at the same time, I was really happy for her. What she was about to experience. And I looked at her and right into her eyes, and I said, "Mother, I can promise you you're going to be cleaning this house," because it was her house. We were able to walk in. As we walked in, I had her knock on the door or ring the doorbell, and she wouldn't do it, right? She was very timid, and she was like, look, I'm wearing shorts and sandals, and she was embarrassed of how she was dressed. My brothers opened the door for her, and she was in shock.
Yeah.
She didn't know what was this about, and I told my mom, I said, remember, I told you I would buy you a house? Nobody else can ever kick you out of this house. Her house is paid for. It's her house. She's my boss. What can I say?
That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Dr. Ramy Awad shares some stories of his mentors and why he chose bariatric surgery.
The most influential person in my life probably would be my surgical training program. We worked with a lot of different surgeons, and there was a couple in mind. One was Ninh Nguyen, who was a former president of ASMBS, just past former president of ASMBS, and he's a minimally invasive surgeon and a bariatric surgeon and does a lot of esophageal surgery as well. So training with him, you got to see a big breadth of different types of cases, and you got to see minimally invasive surgery, and we've seen a lot of bariatric surgery, and that really allowed me to see the benefits of bariatric surgery, the safety profile, how life-changing it is, and the fact that it is really something that I enjoyed, and we tend to gravitate to our talents, so I just kind of naturally was led there.
So I would assume that he's kind of a mentor to you.
He is, yeah. We still keep in contact.
Wonderful. And you'd say maybe he directed you towards bariatrics?
I think my experience with him directed me toward bariatrics and what I like to do and what I enjoyed. But obviously it was a good experience, and he had a big part to do with that. During my training, I was exposed to a lot of different fields of surgery and met a lot of different surgeons. So a lot of our choices are experience dependent, and I had a great experience in the field of bariatric surgery. It's one of those fields where, one, you change people's lives, and in a positive way, and also in a cosmetic way, but also in a quality of life and a health way. These are really kind of life-changing surgeries, and what really kind of impressed upon me was the fact that everybody would come back and say, I feel like I have a new life, I feel younger, and their health problems get better, and they're able to spend time with their kids and take them to the park. So these surgeries really kind of give patients their lives back. The technology is great too. Everything's done through kind of minimally invasive techniques. We get to use little cool gadgets and robots and other different things that is nice, and really it's a field where it's very progressive.
And it's a safer surgery now, I understand.
It's very safe. So
Okay.
really the advent of minimally invasive techniques revolutionized the field of surgical weight loss. Heavy patients don't do well with open surgery. So now everything's done through tiny little incisions, little keyholes, little tiny 5mm or little bigger incisions, which results in very little postoperative pain, less complications, and patients are in the hospital 1 to 2 days after these big surgeries.
Now, do you focus on patients that you are referred from other doctors, like diabetes doctors, where their life is literally on the line and they're dependent on insulin and their lifestyle is really difficult?
Unfortunately, yes. These should not be really kind of last resort types of surgeries, because we know that early intervention is very important, because a lot of these medical problems have cumulative effects, and if you intervene early, it's important. But a lot of times we get referrals from doctors who deal with patients who are poorly controlled diabetics, patients who have really bad hips, really bad back pain, cardiovascular disease. A lot of times patients come to us because they have a friend who lost a lot of weight. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of times the referrals through patients, testimonial, as well as physician directed.
The lifestyle they choose after this surgery is crucial, I would assume.
It's very important. One of the things we do see every once in a while is patients regaining a little bit of weight. Uh-huh. And I'm a big believer that the surgery doesn't fail the patient. The patient sometimes fails the surgery. Mm-hmm. It's a full-time job. You really have to work on maintaining the weight and keep it off. So you have to make good dietary decisions, and you have to really implement physical activity in your lives.
Do you direct them in any way or encourage them to join a gym? Is that part of what you do in your office?
Yes, and our program here, we have, what we realize is you can have the best surgery, but if you let the patient go and say, see ya in a year, there's no accountability. Having accountability is very important, and having a program that has a lot of different aspects, like a personal trainer, dietitian support group, seminars, exercise classes, where they develop personal connections with other patients, and it's almost like a healthy competition where they work with each other and encourage one another. So the aftercare is very important, and I think
you have an
we
aftercare
have that,
program
yeah.
here.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's wonderful. So how much do you stay in touch with your patients after the surgery? How often do they come in?
Well, I tell them they're my patients for life.
I like
Most
that.
of them like that.
Wow, yes.
But most of the patients are my patients for life. We follow them for risk of nutritional deficiencies, because these surgeries sometimes can put them at risk for nutritional deficiencies if they're not compliant with the supplementations we recommend. Also, the fact that they come see me and they know they don't want to disappoint their surgeon, so they really kind of make good dietary decisions and try to implement a good aftercare program. But we see them usually for the first year every 3 months, and then every 6 months thereafter.
I think that sounds awesome, really. Now, there are different types of the surgery for weight loss. Can you tell us what those are?
So there's quite a bit of options for patients now, but the main surgeries we do, one is the gastric bypass. And the gastric bypass, it's done through minimally invasive techniques, meaning laparoscopic approach. And that procedure really was established in the late 60s as an open procedure and kind of the mid-90s as a laparoscopic procedure. And that's our gold standard time-tested procedure. We do that. We also do, the gastric bypass is a procedure where you make the stomach small and you reroute the intestines in such a way that not all the food they eat is seen by the intestines. So you create a malabsorptive state. And that's a good procedure, and we see a lot of resolution of diabetes. It has a very profound effect on diabetic resolution. So patients do very well from a diabetic standpoint with a gastric bypass.
Interesting. So the food is just going through the body without absorbing it. Am I understanding that right?
It's being absorbed.
Okay.
But some of the intestines are excluded from seeing the food, so it's not being fully absorbed.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. If you have a turning point you'd like to share, please call the number at the bottom of the screen. Remember, you gotta look for the good in the bad, the happy in your sad,
The gain in your pain, and what makes you grateful, not hateful. Have a wonderful week, friends, and thank you for watching.